Hello, and welcome back to the Sleep with Science. Tonight, we gently step into one of the most fascinating territories modern research has uncovered. The phenomenon often called mind over matter. Not as a cliché, not as motivational language, but as a measurable, documented frontier where thoughts, expectations, and attention interact with physiology in ways that continue to surprise even seasoned scientists. This is the story of how expectation can alter pain, how belief can influence chemistry, how attention can change perception, and how the boundary between mental experience and biological function is far more permeable than we once believed. For generations, experiences like placebo responses, stress reactions, and psychosomatic symptoms were dismissed as imagination. But today, these effects are recorded in brain scans. They appear in immune markers. They show up in hormone levels, nerve signals, and cardiovascular shifts. Across medicine, psychology, and neuroscience, researchers repeatedly encounter the same quiet conclusion. The separation between mind and body is thinner than we were taught. These discoveries do not replace biology, they expand it. They reveal that biology includes interpretation, and interpretation has measurable consequences. If you enjoy these slow explorations into science and consciousness, you're welcome to like, subscribe, or leave a gentle thought below. It helps others find their way here, one quiet mind at a time. But for now, there is nothing you need to do. Let your breathing slow. Let your shoulders soften. Allow your eyes to grow heavier if they wish. And we'll begin. Your expectations begin shaping perception before the world even fully arrives. The brain does not passively receive reality, it predicts it. If identical wine is poured into two bottles, one labeled expensive and one labeled cheap, people consistently describe richer, deeper flavor from the expensive bottle, even though the liquid is exactly the same. In classic sensory experiments, simply changing the color of a drink alters how sweet participants report it tasting, without altering the recipe at all. Why? Because perception is constructed. The brain combines incoming sensory data with prior beliefs, memories, and predictions. When the prediction is strong, it can partially override raw input. This is why you may suddenly notice a sound only after someone points it out. It is why a harmless shadow can momentarily look threatening in dim light. It is why anxiety can turn a normal heartbeat into a perceived emergency. Scientists call this framework predictive processing. According to this model, the brain is constantly generating hypotheses about the world. Incoming signals are compared against those hypotheses. If they match closely enough, the brain fills in the rest. When they don't match, surprise occurs, and the model updates. Expectation, then, becomes an active ingredient in perception, and expectations can be trained. Over time, what you anticipate shapes what you notice. What you repeatedly notice shapes what feels real. Your world becomes partly guided by the patterns your brain has learned to expect. A pill with no active drug can still alter heart rate, breathing patterns, and hormone release. If someone believes they are taking a stimulant, their pulse may rise. If they believe they are taking a sedative, breathing may slow. Even saline injections, entirely inert, have shifted blood pressure when framed as powerful medication. Part of this response comes from conditioning. Your body learns associations. If hospitals mean treatment, and treatment has previously meant relief, the nervous system may begin preparing before any pharmacological effect begins. Hormones shift, blood vessels respond, muscles subtly change tone. Researchers sometimes call this the meaning response. Context becomes part of the dose. White coats, pill color, price, authority, ritual. All of these factors can nudge the response upward or downward. The nervous system is constantly scanning for cues of threat or safety. When cues signal help is arriving, physiology often shifts toward repair. This is not imagination. In some placebo pain studies, brain imaging shows activation in the same opioid pathways triggered by real analgesic drugs. When researchers block opioid receptors with medications like naloxone, the placebo relief can disappear, confirming that the brain had released its own internal pain-relieving chemicals. Expectation becomes a biological signal. A thought travels from cortical areas down to brainstem centers that regulate pain processing. Those centers can dampen incoming pain signals before they even reach conscious awareness. Belief becomes chemistry. There is also the darker mirror of this effect, the nocebo response. When people are warned that a harmless treatment may cause headaches, nausea, or dizziness, they are more likely to report those symptoms, even when receiving inert substances. Brain scans show activation in threat networks. Stress hormones rise. Muscle tension increases. Normal bodily sensations become amplified under hypervigilance. A small tingle becomes sharp. A mild pressure becomes alarming. Language plays a role here. Words like sting, burn, or sharp pain can prime the nervous system toward heightened sensitivity. Medical professionals increasingly choose phrasing carefully, not to hide truth, but to avoid unnecessary threat signals. Fear changes physiology, and physiology feeds back into perception. The brain can turn the volume knob on pain. Two people with the same injury can report dramatically different levels of suffering. Pain is not a direct readout of tissue damage. It is a protective decision the brain makes. In high-threat situations, such as battle, soldiers sometimes report little pain until the danger passes. Later, once safety returns, pain intensifies. The brain prioritized survival over suffering. Pain modulation systems in the brainstem respond to context. Fear, reassurance, attention, social support. When safety increases, amplification can decrease. Understanding this does not mean pain is imaginary. It means interpretation influences intensity. Stressful thoughts alone can influence immune signaling. After exams, arguments, or sleepless nights, researchers have measured increased inflammatory markers in the bloodstream. Inflammation is protective. It fights infection and repairs damage. But chronic stress can keep inflammatory pathways elevated longer than necessary. The brain communicates with the immune system through hormones and nerve signals. When threat feels constant, those signals can become dysregulated. Wound healing slows. Vaccine responses may weaken. Fatigue deepens. Yet safety signals can reverse the trend. Rest, social support, relaxation practices, even brief ones, can reduce stress chemistry when practiced consistently. Mind over matter appears here as measurable change. The immune system listens. A steady rhythm can even reduce tremor. Tremor often reflects timing instability within motor circuits. When an external beat provides a reliable reference, the brain can synchronize movement more evenly. Commands become spaced with greater consistency. This is why some individuals walk more steadily when stepping to rhythmic cues. Therapists use rhythmic auditory stimulation in rehabilitation after stroke and in Parkinson's care. The beat supplies prediction. Prediction reduces correction. Movement becomes smoother. The brain predicts sensations constantly, then edits perception to fit its best estimate. You do not wait for reality to arrive, you draft it. Incoming signals are compared to expectation within fractions of a second. When they match closely enough, continuity feels seamless. When they conflict, surprise triggers adjustment. This explains misheard lyrics. It explains why a placebo changes taste. It explains why attention amplifies certain sensations. Reality remains real, but experience is a constructed best fit. Motion sickness demonstrates what happens when sensory stories disagree. The inner ear reports acceleration. The eyes report visual flow. Muscles report posture. When these signals conflict, such as reading in a moving car, the brain struggles to reconcile them. One theory suggests the nervous system interprets severe mismatch as potential poisoning. Nausea becomes protective. Coherence matters. When you look at the horizon on a boat, visual and vestibular signals align. The stomach often settles. Optical illusions reveal the shortcuts perception uses. Lines appear bent because depth assumptions override geometry. Colors appear different because context influences comparison. Motion appears where none exists because prediction fills gaps. Illusions are not failures of vision. They are windows into its rules. Perception favors speed over precision. Most of the time, the shortcuts help you navigate efficiently. Occasionally, they reveal how interpretation shapes seeing. Control influences pain intensity. When you can predict a sensation or stop it voluntarily, pain often decreases. The same stimulus feels more tolerable when chosen rather than imposed. Control signals safety. Safety lowers stress chemistry. Lower stress reduces muscle guarding. Guarding amplifies discomfort. Agency shifts experience. Fear can literally narrow vision. Under threat, attention concentrates on central cues. Peripheral awareness decreases. This tunnel effect may help in emergencies. In modern stress, it can limit perspective during meetings or social situations. When fear softens, perception widens again. Emotion reshapes sensory priority. High anxiety also magnifies harmless sensations. A mild flutter becomes alarming. Attention locks onto it. Stress hormones rise, creating additional sensations. Interpretation feeds physiology, which feeds interpretation again. Many panic episodes begin with normal signals misread as danger. Learning that urgency does not equal catastrophe interrupts the loop. Naming emotion recruits regulatory circuits. When you label a feeling clearly, anxious, sad, frustrated, language networks engage. Imaging studies suggest amygdala activity can decrease slightly when emotion is named accurately. The feeling remains, but overwhelm lessens. A word becomes structure. Structure reduces chaos. Reframing stress alters performance. Heart rate increases before speech. If interpreted as fear, it competes with focus. If interpreted as readiness, it can enhance alertness. Physiology may look similar in both cases. Meaning determines whether escalation continues or stabilizes. The story you assign changes the trajectory. A physiological sigh, 2 short inhales followed by a long exhale, can reset breathing patterns quickly. It reopens small air sacs in the lungs and activates calming pathways. Many people sigh spontaneously after stress. The body resets itself. Blushing demonstrates how meaning alters circulation. Social attention triggers rapid dilation of facial blood vessels. Even imagining embarrassment can warm the cheeks. Thoughts about reputation translate into vascular change. Emotion writes directly onto the skin. The startle reflex proves that action often precedes thought. A loud sound activates brainstem circuits before conscious awareness catches up. Muscles brace first. Explanation arrives second. Much of behavior unfolds below narration. Your heartbeat shapes fear intensity. Signals from each beat travel upward, informing the brain of internal state. During certain phases of the cardiac cycle, fear cues may feel stronger. Interoception blends inner rhythm with outer stimulus. A racing heart can intensify perceived threat. Calming the heart softens emotional tone. Hunger alters perception. When blood sugar drops, neutral faces can appear more hostile. Irritation rises more easily. After nourishment, the same environment often feels less charged. Internal state colors social interpretation. Sleep deprivation amplifies pain signals and reduces emotional control. Inflammatory markers shift. Cognitive flexibility drops. Minor discomfort feels heavier. Rest restores resilience gradually. Expectation alone can influence alertness. In studies where participants were told they slept exceptionally well, some performed better despite unchanged sleep duration. Belief shifted attention and effort allocation. Energy perception partly reflects narrative. Dreams may rehearse threat scenarios. During REM sleep, emotional circuits remain active while motor output is inhibited. The brain runs simulations without physical risk. Nightmares reflect heightened rehearsal. Lucid dreaming reveals awareness within simulation. Consciousness has layers. Imagining sensory experiences activates overlapping neural networks with actual perception. Picture bright light. Pupils may subtly constrict in some individuals. Imagine a favorite meal. Salivation can begin. Imagination recruits physiology. Breathing style influences oxygen efficiency. Nasal breathing increases resistance, encouraging slower rhythm and steadier carbon dioxide regulation. Athletes sometimes use it to maintain controlled effort. breath training increases tolerance to rising carbon dioxide, reducing panic sensitivity. Interpretation changes tolerance. Cold exposure feels different when attention shifts from resistance to observation. Experienced cold swimmers describe the initial shock followed by settling. The water temperature remains constant. The distress response changes. Meaning reduces intensity. Purpose alters endurance. When discomfort serves a valued goal, perceived effort drops relative to the same workload without meaning. Value shifts cost evaluation. Elaborate treatment rituals can enhance placebo responses. Injections often outperform pills in placebo strength. Ceremony amplifies expectation. Expectation amplifies physiology. Open-label placebos, honestly described as inert, have shown benefit in some trials. Conditioning and agency appear involved. Words influence pain perception. Describing a procedure as sharp increases sensitivity compared to neutral phrasing. Suggestion can create itch without irritant. Watching someone scratch can trigger your own sensation. Mirroring systems simulate observed states. Seeing blood can trigger vasovagal responses, lowered heart rate, dizziness, nausea. The body reacts to perceived injury nearby. Touch gates pain signals in the spinal cord. Rubbing a bumped elbow reduces incoming pain transmission. Competing sensory input shifts the balance. Stress slows wound healing. Cortisol alters immune timing. Chronic vigilance prioritizes survival over maintenance. Safety restores repair. Optimism influences recovery, partly through behavior. Engaged patients move more, adhere better, sleep more steadily. Adrenaline unlocks temporary strength. In emergencies, motor recruitment increases. Pain perception decreases. Afterward, fatigue arrives. Stage fright dries the mouth. Autonomic shifts suppress salivation and tighten throat muscles. Breath control restores steadiness. Some individuals can voluntarily trigger goosebumps by focusing attention. Rare but documented. The voluntary and automatic overlap more than assumed. Yoga and Tai Chi refine sensory integration. Slow transitions challenge balance systems. The brain recalibrates internal maps of position and movement. Practice reshapes representation. Musicians develop expanded cortical maps for frequently used fingers. London taxi drivers show changes in hippocampal regions related to spatial memory. Experience writes itself into neural structure. White matter pathways strengthen with repeated use. Communication becomes faster. Skill becomes smoother. Habits operate through cue, routine, reward loops. Altering cue or reward often proves more effective than suppressing action through willpower alone. Implementation intentions reduce decision fatigue. If this happens, I will do that. Structure quiets negotiation. Posture feeds back into emotion. Open chest, deeper breath, altered muscle tone. The brain interprets readiness. Slumped posture reinforces withdrawal. Expression becomes input. Splashing cold water on the face activates reflexes that slow heart rate. Counting slowly steadies speech. Singing lengthens exhalation and stimulates vagal tone. Loneliness correlates with elevated inflammatory markers in some studies. Connection reduces perceived threat. The immune system adjusts accordingly. Compassion practices alter brain responses to distress. Gratitude journaling reduces rumination before sleep. Mindfulness loosens repetitive attention loops. Tinnitus distress decreases when attention becomes flexible. Catastrophizing amplifies pain through fear and vigilance. Education and graded exposure retrain sensitivity. Chronic pain can persist after tissue healing due to sensitization. The alarm system remains active even when damage resolves. Retraining teaches safety. Fear is prediction. Exposure updates prediction. Nature reduces rumination. Sunlight aligns circadian rhythm. Warm baths support sleep by guiding temperature decline afterward. Ritual reduces uncertainty. Superstitions increase perceived control and sometimes performance. Confidence can subtly alter perceived size of targets. Anxiety stretches subjective time by increasing information density. During REM sleep, muscle inhibition protects the body from acting out dreams. Parkinson's disease illustrates how dopamine shifts alter both movement and motivation. The rubber hand illusion demonstrates that body ownership depends on synchronized sensory input. Virtual reality reduces burn pain by capturing attention deeply enough to quiet pain networks. Choir singing synchronizes breathing and sometimes heart rhythms across participants. Chanting lowers stress through repetition and rhythm. A compassionate thought softens facial muscles and pulse. Small daily mindset shifts accumulate into measurable neural change. Neuroplasticity favors consistency. And as this long arc of evidence settles, the pattern becomes unmistakable. Mind and body are not separate forces in negotiation. They are one system in dialogue. Belief alters chemistry. Fear narrows perception. Breath steadies rhythm. Meaning reshapes endurance. Attention guides biology. Now, let it all loosen. You do not need to remember each detail. Allow your shoulders to soften further. Feel the surface beneath you supporting your weight. If a thought drifts in, let it pass like quiet footsteps fading down a corridor. No need to hold it. No need to chase it. Only breath moving in and breath moving out. Sleep well. Good night. Your breath offers one of the clearest bridges between voluntary and automatic systems. Lengthening the exhale stimulates sensors in the lungs that signal the brain to reduce arousal. This message travels through the vagus nerve, a long communication pathway connecting brain, heart, and digestive organs. When parasympathetic activity rises, heart rate slows. Heart rate variability increases. Muscles soften, often within a single breath. Singers, divers, and meditators train this relationship deliberately. Paced breathing can lower blood pressure over time in some individuals. It can interrupt spirals of panic by giving the nervous system a steady rhythm to follow. Each slow exhale becomes a signal, safe enough, and the body listens. Meditation is often described as rest, but the brain treats it as training. Long-term practitioners show measurable differences in brain regions linked to attention, emotional regulation, and self-awareness. In imaging studies, certain cortical areas appear thicker, particularly those involved in sustained focus and impulse control. This is neuroplasticity in action. Repeated mental practice strengthens circuits the way repeated movement strengthens muscles. Even 8 weeks of structured training has been associated in some studies with detectable shifts in connectivity between emotional centers and regulatory regions. Meditation does not erase emotion. It changes recovery speed. People often report noticing thoughts without being pulled by them. That small gap between impulse and reaction can influence relationships, sleep, and decision-making. Different styles appear to emphasize different networks. Focused attention practices strengthen sustained concentration. Loving-kindness practices activate areas associated with empathy and affiliation. Open monitoring practices alter default mode activity tied to rumination. What began as contemplative tradition is now a laboratory model for reshaping attention itself. Hypnosis reveals another layer of flexibility. Under hypnotic suggestion, people can report reduced pain even when the stimulus remains unchanged. Brain imaging shows altered activity not only in sensory regions, but also in areas related to meaning and interpretation. The sensation may still arrive, but the brain labels it differently. Hypnosis does not remove input, it changes context. Dentists and surgeons sometimes use it as support when anxiety amplifies discomfort. Not everyone responds equally, and it is not mind control. It works best as guided cooperation, focused attention narrowing competing signals. In that state, suggestion can recruit internal calming systems similar to those activated during deep absorption in music or film. Attention becomes selective medicine. Your body also responds to imagined threats. Picture an upcoming interview. Your palms may sweat before you move. Watch a tense scene in the film, and your pulse may climb even though you are safe. The brain's threat detection systems do not always distinguish between memory, prediction, and present reality. If a scenario feels urgent enough, adrenaline releases. Blood shifts toward muscles. Digestion slows. This response is adaptive in real danger, but in chronic anxiety, it can remain partially active. People living with persistent worry often feel fatigue not because they are weak, but because their nervous systems repeatedly rehearse emergencies that never arrive. Therapies such as exposure and imagery rehearsal reverse this process. By repeatedly experiencing feared scenarios safely, the brain updates its predictions. The alarm quiets, muscles soften, heart rhythm steadies. Thought shapes physiology. Physiology feeds the next thought. Often, the body reacts before the sentence in your mind is even complete. A fleeting idea of urgency can tighten the jaw, shoulders, or stomach within milliseconds. Motor pathways prepare for action before conscious evaluation finishes. Many people carry low-level muscular bracing throughout the day without noticing until pain or fatigue emerges. The feedback loop runs quietly. Tight muscles send danger signals back to the brain. The brain interprets tension as confirmation of threat. Learning to soften the body early interrupts escalation. Slow exhaling can calm panic, not by adding oxygen, but by stabilizing carbon dioxide levels. Many panic sensations stem from hypersensitivity to carbon dioxide changes. Rapid breathing lowers carbon dioxide too quickly, creating dizziness and tingling that feel alarming. A long, steady exhale restores balance. It reassures the brainstem that breathing is under control. Over time, repeated practice lowers reactivity. Sensations once interpreted as catastrophic become tolerable. This is not forcing calm, it is retraining interpretation. Biofeedback demonstrates that even subtle physiological processes can be guided with awareness. In thermal biofeedback, a small sensor measures fingertip temperature. Stress constricts small blood vessels, cooling the skin. By observing temperature changes in real time, individuals learn which thoughts or muscle patterns shift circulation. With practice, many can intentionally warm their fingertips by relaxing attention and posture. The process reveals something important. What feels automatic may still be trainable. Mental rehearsal extends this idea into movement. Athletes imagining lifts, sprints, or precise motor sequences activate many of the same brain regions used during actual performance. Neural timing patterns strengthen without muscle contraction. Studies have found measurable strength gains from imagery alone, particularly when paired with physical training. The brain refines coordination maps. When real movement occurs, it feels familiar. Strength is partly muscle, but it is also signal clarity. Phantom limb pain offers a powerful example of how the brain constructs bodily experience. After amputation, many individuals continue to feel sensation, itching, cramping, burning, in a limb that no longer exists. The brain's body map remains active. Nearby sensory signals can trigger this outdated representation. In some cases, the mismatch between motor intention and sensory feedback generates pain. Pain here is real, but it is not coming from tissue. Mirror therapy uses visual illusion to update that map. By reflecting the intact limb to appear where the missing one would be, the brain receives matching movement confirmation. In many cases, phantom pain decreases. Sight reshapes sensation. The nervous system prefers coherence. When intention, vision, and feedback align, alarm softens. Chronic stress affects memory structures over time. The hippocampus, central to learning and emotional regulation, is sensitive to prolonged cortisol exposure. Animal research shows reduced branching of neurons under chronic stress. Human studies associate long-term stress with differences in hippocampal volume and memory clarity. This helps explain why sustained stress can make thinking feel foggy. The encouraging part is reversibility. When stress reduces, plasticity allows recovery. Sleep, exercise, therapy, and supportive relationships are linked with improved cognitive resilience. The brain remains adaptable. Touch provides another biological safety signal. Gentle, reassuring contact activates specialized nerve fibers connected to emotional processing regions. Cortisol levels can decrease. Pain ratings can drop. Muscle guarding can relax. The effect depends on trust and consent. When touch signals safety, the nervous system shifts from defense toward restoration. Even hand-holding during medical procedures has been associated with lower distress. Connection is chemistry. Laughter releases endorphins and shifts attention outward. Shared humor often increases pain tolerance temporarily. Breathing synchronizes. Facial muscles soften. Threat monitoring decreases. The change may be brief, but it demonstrates flexibility. A comforting voice can regulate infants' heart rate and breathing. Co-regulation begins early in life. The tone, rhythm, and predictability of a caregiver's voice influence autonomic balance. Over time, repeated soothing interactions teach internal regulation. This wiring persists into adulthood. Tone matters as much as content. The vagus nerve connects brain and gut continuously. Fullness, nausea, and digestive rhythms communicate upward. Stress signals travel downward. When safety rises, digestion improves. When threat rises, appetite and gut motility can change abruptly. Butterflies in the stomach are not metaphor. The gut contains extensive neural networks coordinating movement and chemical signaling. Stress alters those patterns. Emotion has a bodily address. Smell powerfully links memory and feeling. Olfactory signals travel directly to emotional centers without the detours typical of other senses. A single scent can resurrect a childhood kitchen or a rainy street decades later. Memory arrives with sensation attached. Music organizes physiology through rhythm. Breathing drifts toward tempo. Heart rate can synchronize with predictable patterns. In rehabilitation, rhythmic cues help retrain gait timing after neurological injury. Sound becomes structure. The brain recruits rhythm as scaffolding for coordination. And so, layer by layer, evidence accumulates. Perception is constructed. Emotion shapes sensation. Belief influences biology. And we are only halfway through this landscape.